Hello and welcome. This video will cover the errors in measurement experiment, for which we are going to measure the different dimensions, length, width, and height of these different blocks using this vernier caliper. You are going to do it for more than one block. You will need to read your sheet for the exact number of blocks. You will need to read your sheet carefully, as there are some other tasks you will need to do while doing this experiment. This video will cover the experimental work and taking the measurements, and mainly how to use a vernier caliper. You will need to refer to your sheet to know exactly what you have to do. I will start by briefing you about the vernier caliper, the different measurements you can take using it, and then we'll cover how to read a measurement from it. So the vernier caliper, you can always move it like that and open it up to the size which you want to get measurement. The vernier caliper can take rectangular dimensions, something like that, like the length of this block, for example, or diameter of pipes, cylinders, and so on. Always, you will need to clamp whatever you need to measure between these two calipers. You'll need to make sure it's straight and they are taking the right measurement. Straight, I mean, you can see now the block is in line with these clamps. So this will give you a correct measurement. However, if you just turn that little bit, you can see the block is still in the clamps, but there are gaps on both sides. This kind of measurement will give you wrong measurements. You can see if you keep it straight, you will end with a gap in one of the sides. So always push it, hold it well before you get a measurement. The vernier caliper got lock in here, which will help you lock the caliper at this specific position and remove the item which you want to measure. Now the caliper is not going to move. That will help you to get the measurement or read the measurement clearly without having the caliper fitted on the object. And remember, now we are using these black blocks which can move with the calipers. But sometimes if you are measuring a pipe, part of the system, or you are measuring some item which is fixed to somewhere else, just like, for example, how if I can measure the thickness of the table I'm using here. So it might be a bit difficult in some places to read from the caliper. So we use the lock on the side here again. We lock it, we remove it, and we can read it conveniently. After you are done with that, remember to open always the lock before moving the caliper again. So we covered this part with these calipers, which normally take external dimension or external diameter of cylinders and pipe. This side here can do also measurements, but they are designed for internal diameter. To show you example on that, I brought this box spanner in here. Okay? Now this box spanner is 20 millimeter. So if I measure between any of these inside or the internal diameter, I expect to get 20 millimeters. In order to do that, I'm going to use this side of the caliper, and this goes in, and then we move the caliper till it touches both sides. Again, we'll need to make sure it's straight in order to get right measurements. We can use the lock again and move it up to get a reading. And in this case, I'm getting 20.1 millimeters, which are, as you can see in here. So I get 20 on the main ruler, and on the dial gauge I get 0.1. Again, we'll open the lock before we use the caliper again. And the third dimension you can use this caliper to take is depth, using this side of it. So we'll come back again to the box spanner, and this time I would like to get the depth. So we'll get the caliper in and we'll keep moving it. Let me little bit get more over travel so you can see clearly. So the caliper, this side of the caliper is touching the table, and then we are going to push slowly till the other side of the caliper or the ruler side of the caliper touch the top of this box spanner. Something like that. Again, we can lock the caliper to get the right reading. In a similar way, you will read the caliper, and then this time you will get the depth. So these are basically the three types of measurement you can do a vernier calipers. Vernier calipers comes in different scales, with different sizes, sometimes with different build of different material. Similar like this plastic one I have in here, and the smaller one available. So they are built for different purposes. However, they all look the same. They might scale down or up, but the basics are all the same. This specific caliper, which we are using for this experiment, is provided with a dial gauge in here. This dial gauge will give you divisions of millimeters, and it is a full turn on this. Like, for example, if we move from this 0 to this 0 again, like full turn, this will be 2 millimeters. Half turn, just up to this, will be basically 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter divided into 0.02 divisions. So we are getting the, let's say, the main dimension, the integer, is from this main ruler in here. And we get any fraction of that from this dial gauge down to 0.02 millimeter. And all this information normally are printed inside the dial gauge, which, as you can see now. And in order to zero this, always before taking any measurement, always we need to make sure the vernier caliper is reading 0 or the dial gauge is reading 0. So what we do, we close it to the maximum, like that, and it should read 0 by now. If it's not 0, you can turn always this screen in here, and you need to make sure it's pointing to 0, something like that. Now, if it points to 0 and you have finished with the zeroing, you can lock this from here. So we got two locks. This is for the zeroing mechanism, and this is for the caliper itself. So now the caliper is moving, but the 0 is fixed there. If we lock this one down, then the caliper is not going to move anymore. So this is basically how to use vernier caliper, how to get reading of it. I'll include some examples for you to get familiar with these readings. For the errors in measurement experiment, as I mentioned earlier, you will be getting different blocks. You will need to get the 3 measurements of them. Let's say now we are getting the width of this block, then we get the length of it, and lastly will be the height. You will repeat that for all the provided blocks, and you will need to follow your sheets for any other requirements. In the lab, there will be a weighing scale available for you, just in case your sheet is asking you to provide mass or density of these items. So always you can ask about weighing scale, and you get the weight of the different blocks you have. So this is basically it. Thank you for watching.